Hey everybody, DJ Lou here, and I constantly get questions on how I shoot my video, make the audio sound really good, how I get it out to social and everything. And it's a very involved process. I've had a couple videos on some of the equipment that I've bought over the years, but I want to get really deep and into detail of everything. The equipment I've chosen, why I chose it, what I do when I get it home, how I do my edits, ultimately how I get it up to social media. So this is going to be a long one, so buckle in and let's deep dive into how I do video. Now, first and foremost, a big disclaimer here. I am not a professional videographer. I do try to stay into the details on things. I read the reviews, I watch a lot of content about it. I do know quite a bit about photography. I've actually done photography in the past, both in a professional capacity and of course amateur. I like taking photos. And I've been able to transcend some of those ideas over those years into how I take my video for DJs. Now, part of this is just to get past the basic taking video with an iPhone and that's it. Now, nothing wrong with that. And I encourage anybody that's not doing video, at least start with your iPhone, Android, whatever it happens to be, and try to take some good shots. But as a really active DJ, I'm constantly doing stuff and I know I'm going to miss opportunities of video that I might miss. So I wanted a way to basically capture as much footage as possible and then be able to sift through it when I get home. Now, no lie, I'm still using an iPhone from time to time at my booth. I'll actually set this at the wide angle side. And if it happens to be a fairly shallow room or something like this really helps to get some really interesting perspective. Also, I'm recording audio from here to catch any errant discussions that come up to my booth. So I'm still using, in this case, this is my iPhone 14 Pro. I have an iTunes 13 as well. Has a broken screen, but hey, the camera's still good on it. So nothing wrong with using an iPhone. Just make sure you know what its capabilities are and its limitations as well. I've, again, gone through many cameras over the years. I've really settled into Sony as being basically the king of the crop when it especially comes to low light. Their sensors are just really damn good. And from a price point, especially some of their lower end cameras, like what I have, the ZV1, you get some really great low light performance in a relatively affordable package. I have this now on a gimbal. I actually experimented with this at Harvest of Sound. I really like the way it feels. This is going to be my secondary camera because I do have two of these. Now this does have an internal battery and this helps to control some of the pan, tilt, and then record functions on the camera. But I don't think the battery will last nearly long enough on this, so I have my external battery as well. This is a 10,000 milliamp battery. I actually have two of these. Powers out through USB to USB-C. Hooks right into the USB port here on the side and actually has a nice little thread, if it will let me do it. Then I can just come in and thread as necessary. And then I can use this as a stabilizer as I'm walking through. So I'm going to use this now basically as my really creamy footage, as much as I can get in to the action. Basically, I'll have this inside my booth, grab as necessary, and come in and out. Now, I have another ZV1 still, matter of fact, the one I'm recording on this right now, and that's going to be on my tripod, and that'll be what I've done in the past, my camera on a stick philosophy. So again, one of these batteries, the Sony ZV1 in a cage, big memory card, 256 megabytes on it. I can record for hours, and that's the whole purpose of this, is just get that steady recording as much as possible. I'll move the camera around from time to time just so it won't get too dull of the same angle over and over. I might zoom in ever so slightly and whatnot. But I want to make sure that I get basically, again, as much footage as possible. Now, a couple additional specs on the ZV1. I do record in 4K. And ultimately I output at 1080. But the reason I record in 4K is if I want to zoom in on an area, I have more pixels to work with. So if I'm doing, say, a 200% zoom on it, I'm not going to lose detail once I do a final video on this. So just be mindful of how you're recording, the material you're trying to recording, how close you can get to your subjects, how much post-production you want to do on this, how many camera angles, of course, you want to deal with. In the end, I just think the more detail that you have on all this, the better off you'll have something that's truly remarkable that comes out of any event that you'll be able to use for your social media. I get a lot of questions of how does my audio sound so good on this, is because I'm also recording everything from the source off my Soundcraft UI24. I did this with the UI16 as well, so if you have a digital mixer that has the record capabilities, please go ahead and use that. If you just want to record off Serato Virtual DJ, use that as well. So if you're doing this all in post, you can take your audio from your digital mixer, take your audio from your camera, and get both the crowd reactions and everything from the camera, but overlay the really crispy audio from the original source. And I think that's really critical in this. I see a lot of actually great videos of people sharing their experiences at a lot of these events. But, you know, the audio can be very muffled or very overblown. Being able to record your original source is absolutely critical, I think, in all this. So I'm gone over with the cameras that I use, how I record my audio, where I'm recording it, and now I'm going to be bringing, of course, all this home. Now, I will tell you just straight out, if you do not keep ahead with all your edits as possible, you're going to find yourself way behind. I was at one point somewhere around like 21 or 22 events that I needed to edit. And while you can get into a good rhythm to do some editing, I strongly suggest don't let it just hang around too long, because it'll just pile up and you will feel stressed to be able to go in, cut up all this stuff and make some good use out of it. So just don't fall by the wayside. Make sure that you're treating this just as importantly as anything else you would do for an event. So I've gotten home now and I want to start to do all my edits. Well, first things first, of course, I take my SD cards out of my cameras. I will, if I've had my iPhone, start to hook that up, and I'll actually do AirDrop. It's actually quicker than trying to do that over USB. I'll take my USB drive out of my digital mixer, and I'll just dump everything over to a 2 terabyte external SSD. Now, of course, if you have that kind of space internally, by all means, and I definitely suggest using an SSD and not a spinner, working with video, especially 4K video. It's very intensive. This is a pretty speedy SanDisk. You can find other models out there, you know, 4 terabytes, 2 terabyte models. I think 2 terabytes gets me enough. I can fit, again, around 20 events out of this. Each event definitely records at a little bit different pace, because you might only do 1 hour of dance recording. You might be doing 3 hours of dance recordings. You might also capture ceremony and maybe toast or some other things that might add to that. So just be mindful of how much content that you're actually going to be pulling in. And just a note, and it's kind of skipping towards the end, all my data then goes to a spinner once I'm done with it. I want a permanent archive in this, and I've actually have all my weddings from 2014 on audio-wise, and all my weddings from 2018 and on from video-wise. I have an archive of everything. All right, everybody, I'm over here on the laptop, and forgive me, please, because I'm using one additional external monitor on this, and so it'll be a little odd for me, just the way I normally do things. I normally have 3 monitors. My MacBook Pro monitor usually ends up being my reference monitor for the output, because of color corrections and everything like that. And then, of course, I have my 2 big LGs side by side to give me a really wide workspace to work out of. But we're going to do this for now, so hopefully my face doesn't look too weird as I look up and do all this. So my main programs I use, Final Cut Pro is my video editor of choice, and I use Mac OS Photos for all my storage of everything. That's what I'll ultimately use to bring it out to social media. So first, I'll of course create an actual folder within here with the date and the couple's name, so that way it makes it easier basically for search in that regard. And in this case, I already had some photos that were given to me by the photographer on site that day, so I have a number of photos that came from that. And I'll also search to see if I had any additional video. I have this 1 16-second clip that was brought in there. I've got some interesting wide shots and things of that nature. As you see over here, I actually had my iPhone set up for this, and I totally forgot to charge my battery. So that became useless after a few moments. So everything that I have is over here up above. So what I've got in here on my video drive is, again, I'll create the event name and the couple's name, and I'll start off with an originals folder. And in this case, I'm basically dumping everything that I have that I recorded for the day. So a monogram that I actually created for the event. I have, and I named this Toad because this was originally a camera that I had installed on the Toad, and I just moved over to a tripod. So I've got all the video that I shot for all day. The UIRIC is the recording source from my UI24. And basically I just let that record throughout. So there's basically two segmented files out of that. The one that ends in 405 is the first, and 01 is the appended file for later recordings and all that. And here's all the photos that the photographer gave me as well. I dumped it over here for safekeeping. So with that in mind, I'm just going to move over photos for now. And now I know I have everything in the originals. I'm going to create two more folders in here. I'm going to create working and then finals. So these are basically my three main folders that I am going to work out of for these events. I'm going to bring that over here for now. I'm now going to create a new library. And for those that don't know Final Cut Pro, there's basically your library is your main structure, your main container that's used for the event. And then beyond that, you can create projects and whatnot in here. So I'm going to go here into Grace and Matthew. We're going to go into working, and I actually like to call my working Final Cut Pro the same exact name as I created the folder. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go ahead and import the media. I'm going to go over to my video drive, into Grace and Matthew. I'm going to go into originals, and I am going to go ahead and select all the super important ones. So Toad, 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 the monogram. I think there's one more Toad or two more Toad files. And of course, I have the UIREC files, and that should be it. So I'm going to go ahead, import all this. It gives me all these files to kind of work with. Now, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to create a compound clip. Again, I can't really speak too big on all the intricacies of Final Cut Pro. But compound clip is basically just creating a clip that you can pretty much do almost anything to manipulate out of it. So I'm just going to call this audio. Got my audio file. I'm going to make sure it appended it right, and we're all good on that. So now I'm also going to take all of these video files. I'm going to take the audio file, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to synchronize. And what it's going to do is going to take the audio cues out of each part of the video and try to match it up with the video. Most of the time this actually works well, so I'm just going to call this video. And I am going to let it run. This does usually take a couple minutes, but by far well worth the time and investment in all this. All right, so with that done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually peek into the video file. And I want to make sure that all these did exactly what I wanted, and it did exactly that. And again, as you can hear, all the audio is scrubbing. Now, right off the bat, my audio on the cameras run relatively hot. You know, I have them set down so they don't over impede, but they tend to be a little loud. And since I'm only using that audio for a secondary audio source just to hear the crowd, I'm going to go over here into the audio setting, and I'm actually going to set this -6 dB. Now, I also know with my Soundcraft, that's actually recorded relatively low, and that's actually a good thing because I don't want to especially over impede the original source. So I'm literally going to crank this all the way up to 12 dB, see where my peaks are, and actually I think I'm going to probably settle around 10 dB. I want to see a little bit of yellow peaks here and there, but not too many things in the red. Usually that red is very, very brief and all that. I usually don't have too much of a problem, but if you see a big section in red, then you know there's going to be a problem. Now that I have these files basically all ready to go, I'm going to save myself a little bit of headache managing all this, and I'm actually going to create a keyword collection, and I'm just going to call this one use. And the reason I do this is I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop my final video file over here, because when I'm basically using and scrubbing through things, I want to make sure that I'm not having to look at all the other original source files and all this. So if I'm going into a larger video view like this, I can see audio as well. I can simply click on this, and now it's only going to be the files I want to use specifically for this. So that's really good on that. I'm going to go back into the root here, and I am going to create a project. And again, I'm going to name this the same. And I actually want to make this -H for my horizontal video, and I don't want 1080i, I want 1080p. And then I'm going to make one here for vertical video as well. So -V, choose this, choose 1080 by 1920. Now, having these two major project files to work with, I can toggle between basically staging up my horizontal video, getting that exactly where I want to, dump that video, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the vertical video, but do some tweaks so it looks better in vertical format. So I'll show you what I'm doing a little bit later, but I'm just giving you the premise of what the heck is going on to begin with. Now, I am going to scrub basically this entire video really quick and see if, basically the event was lively enough that it's worthy of its own basically long format video. It'll sometimes last between 2.5 minutes, sometimes up to 5 or 6 minutes if it was a really long dance session. And if memory serves, this wedding was pretty well packed and is pretty much right for that. But I'm going to go ahead and go into that video file. And I'm just, again, now notice with my camera, it is kind of set wide. I always want to make sure, because you never know, are the people going to be closer to the booth? Are they going to be further away? And again, this is why I record in 4K, because now I can zoom in on these areas and not lose a lot of detail. And I usually only go up to about like 300% zoom. I want to make sure I have enough usable pixels without making things look soft and all that. Let's scrub some more. Everything looks pretty lively. Had some toast that we worked in here. As you see, some people were a little bit closer in this one. Definitely looks like this is going to be worthy of a long cut video. Now, as you'll see, there's definitely some color things going on. I probably had either something get bumped on it and whatnot. That one has definitely some more reds in it. This one's definitely more blue, back to a little bit more reds. So there's definitely some changing colors going on in this. So I have to be mindful that before I make all my big edits, I want to kind of equalize the color as best as possible. So I know this one's way off comparatively, so I'm going to go ahead and do some corrections on this. I did notice with this particular clip, it's actually very, very red. So I'm going to try to kick some of that down some. All right, so just to reiterate, I'm not a professional videographer by any stretch of imagination, so I'm not going to spend tons and tons of time with color correction. I do want to get relatively close. I did notice as I'm scrubbing through that the colors vary from time to time. I do think there's a combination of some of the candles that are on the tables, whatever's going on overhead, is just adding some more dynamics of light changes than are typical. You can combat this when you're filming by having a steady white balance of value on your camera. If the room isn't changing too much overall, then it will kind of lock in. But with auto white balance, it usually does a pretty good job to begin with. It did the best that it could in here. Not perfect, but you know what? In the end, I'm not looking for perfection. But what I am looking for is just some really good content to get out there. So with all that, I'm going to start off with my first cut on this. I'm going to bring these two projects into use. Now I'm going to go in here, and from Final Cut Pro's perspective, the yellow selection is the video or audio that you're using, and it's been selected to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start scrolling through. And again, I was looking for some initial cool action. So I'm going to go ahead, select that, drag it down. Now, if you notice right here on the top, it actually tells me the length of the clip. Now, I try to keep the clips 5 seconds or under. I can go up to 6 because I will use transitions between videos, and that will typically help me to be able to squeeze in within that 5-second mark. Now, it's not a hardened rule. People can definitely still manually check a video, and if they feel there's a copyright violation, they will hit you on it. And most of the time, it will end up just being monetization will be taken away from you. You can get coarse copyright strikes out of it. It really depends on your use case on this. Again, I try to use as small of a segment as possible to get what I'm trying to convey out of it, but to get some additional value out of it. I'm going to zoom in, reposition. And that's usually the goal of videos like this. You want to fill in the screen without having too much dead air, essentially, or white space around them to make it look a little boring. So a little more zoom, a little more raise. So now I've got the first clip that I'm going to be using within this long video format. And actually, I'm going to check one more thing over here. You'll see that we have very abrupt changes. You know, I just went from the very slow song to that very fast, of course, Thunderstruck. In this case, again, I'm going to be using transitions. I'll be fading in and out between the two. So a couple techniques, again, that I like to use in this. Even if it's abrupt changes in style, it doesn't matter much because, of course, we were just in their first dance. And with the transition, it'll, of course, bring the audio down, bring the audio up on the other. It does a pretty good job. And nice little shortcut here in Final Cut Pro. You can just simply do Command-T for the transition. I'm going to take the initial transition out here for a second. And then you'll see what I mean here. And again, I don't necessarily need a long clip. However, one thing that we're going to be doing outside of the long form format is also making short form content here as well. So this is content that I would be using for Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. And I'm going to create two different styles of content for that. One will be a typical horizontal video and the other will be a vertical video. But I want to get a little bit more interesting clip in there for that. So we're going to keep on scrubbing through and see what we can find. Notice when I select my clips, I'm trying to do everything on the beat, so that will really help with the smooth transitions between it. So of course, your typical 4. Of course, you can offset it, but just make sure that audibly when you're going through it in the end, it sounds good. And that one didn't do quite as well as I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to zoom in over here and do a little bit of tweaks to all this. Another trick in Final Cut Pro, if you do a Command-C to copy that clip, you can do a Command-Shift-V, and this is going to actually give you parameters that you can copy over. So in this case, I can do position and scale. If I had audio changes here as well, it'll throw that in there. I'm going to paste it, so it brings my zoom already there, all my X and Y coordinates to basically focus on the same area. Saves me a lot of time in going through all this. Now, a lot of this is trial and error. For my short clips, I do like to actually make a longer clip of that other than 5 seconds. I don't necessarily care if that gets hit by monetization because I'm usually just putting it on TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram. But in this case, you want to make sure that the content basically is vibrant throughout that. That started off pretty good, but kind of faded a little in the end. So I'm going to keep on looking for certain clips within that song to see if it's worth it. If not, move on to the next. So with that, we have a 14-second clip. So definitely much longer than I would want to put in my the long format video. But this gives me great potential for making the shorter form. So I'm going to look at this again. Everything seems good. So I'm going to come at the playhead. I'm going to hit I. So now I'm just going to be selecting this one little clip on the timeline. I'm going to export it. I do name the files, the name of the song, just to kind of make it a little easier. And I'm going to be putting this into finals. Now, while that's doing that, I'm going to go ahead, unselect my in and out on it so it doesn't freak out. So now I'm going to toggle over to my vertical format on here. I'm going to copy it twice. And for a good reason. So I am now going to select that. Let's zoom in over here a little bit so it doesn't look so weird. Taking the audio out of the second clip, I'm going to zoom this into 315%. I am now going to apply a focus blur on it. I am going to blur that 100%. I'm going to bring opacity down to 25%. And now I got a background on a vertical video to make it not so plain. Now, I don't do this with every video. Not every video needs it. But I think with something like this, again, you have some motion blur going in the background to kind of fill in the background. But of course, I have the primary video in here as I walk. Now, I'm going to go ahead and zoom that back in for the more interesting stuff. And that looks good. And I can even go so far as even cropping the top and all that if I really want to. And I'll try and make that even so it looks right to begin with. So, looks good. So now I'm going to go ahead and export this version. It's the vertical version. And then I'm just going to name that VO1 for the first vertical video to come out of this, and export. Yep, I do this anywhere between 5, 15, 20, 30 times for all these videos. Is it a little time consuming? Absolutely. Is it a little bit of a pain in the ass? 100%. But now I'll have all this content that I want to come out into my social. Again, I'll dump this all within my Photos app, and then basically be able to post all of this at will. All right, so I'm not going to bore you with like the hyper details of everything else, trying to get all that video together, but I do want to show you what an end result would look like. So this was another couple that I did, and I actually should probably name this so there's proper capitalization there. And of course I have photos that came out of there. There's my camera on a stick rig and all. So, and of course, all these cases, I got my horizontal and vertical videos. I simply choose what I'm going to do and go ahead and post it. Now, there have definitely been some pluses and minuses from publishing from desktop apps, and I'll kind of mix it up. Sometimes I'll post mobile, sometimes I'll do desktop. If I'm doing desktop, I'll use Buffer. They do have the Reels option to be able to do it, but I find that I could get a little kludgy at times, so I'm not always 100% sold on that. The real importance, though, is to make sure at least a couple times a week getting content out there, and even more importantly, making sure that you're tagging those that you worked with in those posts. So the venues, the photographers, the videographers, caterers, whomever, because what do they like to see? They like to be able to see content that's out there that they didn't have to spend time posting out. And they're going to be reminded that you're the one that worked with them. They're going to be reminded that, wow, I would really like to work with this person. Now, with any luck, they will do the same. Of course, there's no guarantee, but I have found more times than not when I post content and then include the professionals that I've worked with, that they will reciprocate, and then a lot of times I'll get those referrals. Now, I don't want to go through the rigmarole of an entire long format video. This is one I just did within the past 24 hours. I'll stage in the monogram that I used to start that off. And I'll just do a nice little transition out of it.
Look over to my left. Please get up and give it up for Mazen and Christina.
And again, I try to look for the most interesting things within here. I've got 3 minutes and just a few seconds over of some great long form content. Even including the end, had a nice close up.
One more time.
Good stuff. Now, not every wedding that I shoot has great long form content. Sometimes there might only be some really 2, 3, 4, or maybe a couple more really, really great moments. In this particular wedding, it was like just complete nonstop the entire time, so it made for great long form content on this. But again, each one of these clips that I made, about 70–80% of them, I made slightly longer versions for those more smaller posts for Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. I'll use these long form posts for not only YouTube and any kind of reviews that I've had, and I'll post the full long content below that. But also from time to time, I'll post long form content in Facebook, in Instagram, and whatnot. You can do it. I do find that I think with Instagram and TikTok, the shorter form does work better, but it's nice to kind of mix it up and just don't have just little bits. I'll even do long form content in the typical Reels type of vertical format. it'll be something like this. And notice the way that I use this, I'll put the couple's name in here and the date, and it gives me a little area to kind of do some additional native things, be it in TikTok, be it in Instagram, sometimes even a YouTube short if I've got it short enough, to be able to kind of dress it up a little bit. Again, try not to make everything super boring and all that with lots of black bars on it. There's lots of things that you can do with it. I know that was a long one. I hope it was worth it. I hope you've gained some insight of everything that I do for all this naturally. If you like what you see, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button on the channel, hit that thumbs up to engage this video, comment below as well. And thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for more.